I called Ellie. After a while without a connection and just as I was about to hang up, the call connected. Ellie responded with a cheery voice. Hey Jinhoo. Are you at work? I just got off work and was in the shower. I heard the ringtone and somehow thought you'd be the one calling, so I ran over. Should I call you back later? No, it's fine. I'm all done. You're answering the phone after coming out of the shower? So you're not wearing anything right now. You're not imagining things, are you? Of course not. I quickly changed the subject. You're working late again today. Are you very busy? Yes. I've been working overtime for several days. Jessica hasn't left the office at all. She's practically living here. The big one changed not only the geography of the US West Coast but also the landscape of finance. Almost every investment bank took a hit, big or small. However, Golden Gate believed in the potential of the big one, and thanks to their overall adjustment of positions, they made quite a nice profit. As a result, they made a huge donation for this fundraising as well. By the way, OTK company hasn't donated a cent, but nobody is complaining about it. This is understandable, as the US government has already requisitioned billions of dollars worth of relief supplies. They'll settle it later though. I've been keeping up with your news on the media. Today I saw you with Ronald touring the rescue site. That's right. Ronald went to the rescue site to meet and encourage the Korean troops deployed there. Ellie said in a whiny voice. Hearing your voice makes me miss you even more. I really miss you so much too. I never expected to experience this kind of separation right after we decided to date. When will you be back? I'll be back soon, so just wait a little longer. There are a few things I need to do before I return. I got into a car with the security guards and headed to Pasadena near LA. California Institute of Technology was not only the best engineering school in the US, MIT wouldn't agree, but also California's pride. However, after Professor Mohan claimed that the big one was coming, it became a subject of ridicule. For a while, Caltech students couldn't lift their heads in shame, and demands to dismiss Professor Mohan surged. In academia, prominent scholars pointed out his mistakes one by one. Nevertheless, Professor Mohan did not waver in his assertions. Later, when Ronald declared a national emergency in the San Francisco Bay Area, the criticisms spread uncontrollably. Protesters flocked onto the campus, demanding the dismissal of Professor Mohan, threatening to carry out a school shooting if their demands weren't met. When it became difficult to conduct classes normally, Dean Charles Ball stepped in and said, I also believe that Professor Mohan is speaking nonsense. However, diversity in academia must be respected. At one time, claims that the continents moved or that the Earth orbited the Sun were all considered nonsense. If we stop scholars from saying nonsense, who will be able to say anything? To protect Caltech's honor, we will absolutely not dismiss Professor Mohan. Some acknowledged the validity of his words, but the majority directed their criticism at the dean as well. In the end, this judgment proved correct. If they had succumbed to public pressure and dismissed Professor Mohan, Caltech would have become a global laughingstock. The big one had enough power to devastate San Francisco, and nearby cities like LA suffered some damage. Buildings shook violently, shelves collapsed, fluorescent lights fell, and there were various injuries. Fortunately, there were no road fractures or building collapses and Caltech appeared fine. The campus was quiet, perhaps because classes were in session, and I entered the building discreetly so no one would recognize me. Around the seismology center and laboratories, men and women in suits with earpieces stood. After the Big One event, this place was designated as a key facility, and that's why FBI agents were dispatched. I greeted them casually and entered the laboratory. The box of books that had been piled up on one side was gone. The first edition of The Big One is Coming, which was destined for the recycling center, had become a rare book that was hard to obtain even for 10 times its original price. If I had known this would happen, I should have taken a box back then. Professor Mohan was almost burying his face in the computer monitor. I cleared my throat deliberately. He then spoke without looking up. I'll be declining interview requests for a while. Considering he must have done hundreds of media interviews by now, it's understandable that he would be tired of them. How about coffee then? At the sound of my voice, Professor Mohan looked up and smiled. Who is this? I raised the coffee I was holding. Have you been well? The coffee I had when I first visited the lab was disgustingly bad. So I stopped by a cafe before coming. As I looked around the lab, I said, I don't see Carrie. She went to organize some data. She'll be back shortly. She's still busy, huh? After a few aftershocks had passed, Professor Mohan reassured everyone that the seismic activity had calmed down, but he remained alert for any possible occurrences. While sipping his coffee, he said, "There won't be a major earthquake for a while. Minor quakes will keep happening, but they won't be felt by the general public." Is the major earthquake of 1906, 1989, and this year completely over now? He shook his head at my question. That's unlikely. The fact that California lies on the Pacific Ring of Fire hasn't changed. Earthquakes are like a fate for people living here. Whether the next major quake is decades or hundreds of years away is uncertain, but I believe they will find a way to cope by then. I smiled. That's true. That's something for the people of that era to handle. I then told him about the rescue site I visited a few days ago with Ronald. The media shows only a small portion of what truly happens. The actual rescue site was vastly different from what you see on TV. Rather than rescue, it was more like body retrieval. It was a relief to find an intact body. Many were torn, broken, or crushed. Identifying some bodies was quite challenging. Hearing this, Professor Mohan wore a bitter expression. So many lives have been lost. More could have been saved. I too had thought this countless times. Why could we not save everyone despite knowing? Could we have done better? If only one more chance were given. I said calmly, "You did your best. Everyone will think that way. Thank you for saying that." The number of deceased and missing was just under 70,000. This number fluctuated, sometimes decreasing as survivors were rescued and sometimes increasing as more missing persons were reported. A person can survive for about 15 days without food. If there is food in the place where they are trapped, the survival period extends even more. Fortunately, as the threat of earthquakes increased, each household and public facility had stored emergency food and water supplies. Thus, rescue news continued to come in. However, the number of rescues wasn't very high, and it was highly likely that most missing persons had died. Until now, the worst disaster in mainland America was the 9/11 attacks. At that time, the death toll was around 3,000. Yet the big one caused over 20 times that number of deaths. The sheer numbers clearly showed how horrific the disaster was. I changed the subject. How is the atmosphere in academia these days? Before the big one struck, the top scholars all insisted that it would never happen. But when the big one really did come, everyone was in shock. Some apologized, some made excuses, and some completely cut off contact and disappeared. Just recently, Professor Josh Brown came to apologize. Who is he? He's an MIT professor, a leading authority in the field of seismology. Oh, I think I've seen him on TV. Professor Mohan said with satisfaction. You should have seen his expression. Seemed he had a lot bottled up. After all, for a long time he'd been called the Indian, and considered a heretic or oddball in academia. But now he had become the highest authority in seismology. Is this how unpredictable human affairs can be? Professor Mohan had a cup of coffee. A few days ago my grandmother appeared in my dream. What did she say? At my question he seemed a bit shy and replied. She praised me for doing well and caressed my head. Perhaps it's because of her words that I've dedicated my life to research. Thanks to that you've saved many people. Professor Mohan stroked his thick beard with his fingers. However, no matter how much I think about it, there's one thing I can't comprehend. What is it? Professor Mohan paused contemplatively before speaking. How could she have known about events in the future? I was taken aback by that statement. Excuse me? What do you mean? Could he have figured it out? Professor Mohan smiled and said, "Oh, it's about my grandmother. I'm wondering how she could tell me what would happen decades later." Oh, I see. I sighed in relief inwardly. Thinking back, the beginning of all this was his grandmother. If she hadn't warned him about the impending earthquake, he might have chosen a different path, not becoming a seismologist. In that case, I would have faced significant difficulties in warning about Big One's dangers or failed to persuade Ronald. In predicting the future, the key concern is the changes that arise because of it. Like the butterfly effect, even the most trivial actions can drastically change the future. Predictions manifest as self-fulfilling or self-denying prophecies. Let's assume a famous economist predicted a financial crisis in a year. Upon hearing this, businesses would defer investments to prepare for the crisis, and households would reduce consumption. Consequently, the financial crisis could actually occur. Conversely, if the government proactively responded to the crisis by increasing fiscal spending and encouraging investment, the crisis might not happen at all. In either case, the act of making predictions itself influences the future. Suddenly, a question arose in my mind. What future did she see? Did she, like me, witness everything collapsing due to the big one, or did she see the reverse situation we have now? If it's the latter, she might have intentionally told her grandson the prophecy to create the current circumstances. And she probably knew I would act this way. Since she passed away long ago, there's no way to confirm which is correct. As I mentioned before, my grandmother's ancestors were shamanic Indians. Does that mean there's really such power in a shaman's lineage? I said to him, "You're her grandson, Professor. That means you're also a descendant of the shamanic Indians." Really? Professor Mohan looked at me in surprise. Think about it, isn't it a bit strange? To spend your entire life researching earthquakes in California just based on your grandmother's words. Moreover, despite numerous criticisms and counterarguments from the academic community, you stubbornly pushed your own claim. In hindsight, it's clear that his argument had many flaws. If the research results were certain, there wouldn't have been any disputes. Yet Mohan remained completely confident in his claims without a hint of doubt. Perhaps the reason is, maybe unconsciously you knew that the big one was coming, Professor? Professor Mohan had a look of great shock on his face. Lost in thought for a long time, he stammered as he spoke. Well, I've never really thought about it that way, so I'm not sure. I've lived my whole life as a scientist. Therefore, it's hard for me to accept things that aren't scientifically proven. I felt the same way. Until a few years ago, I believed that powers like telekinesis existed only in stories or movies. There are still countless things in the world that haven't been scientifically proven. That's true. Modern science hasn't even accurately identified the causes of earthquakes yet. Just because we can't explain something doesn't mean we can deny it. So, did Grandma really see the future? I smiled slightly. Who knows? There might really be a power to see the future. San Francisco earthquake. Known as the Big One, it was recorded as the largest earthquake not only of the 21st century but also of the 20th century. At the same time, it was likely to be recorded as the disaster with the best response. It was almost miraculous that the damage from the M9.8 earthquake was contained to this extent. Experts, through simulations, estimated that if it had occurred without prior preparation, fatalities could have reached a minimum of 1.3 to 2 million. Moreover, with key personnel in Silicon Valley research labs and headquarters casualties affecting various business plans and projects, tech companies like Apple, Google, and AMZ could have seen stock prices plummet by at least 40%, resulting in a market shock surpassing the 2008 financial crisis, pushing the global economy into recession for the next decade. While the U.S., suffering from irreparable damage, spiraled into chaos, it was predicted that China would expand its influence in the international arena, leading to significant changes in the world order. However, that event did not actually occur. This level of damage was something the U.S. could sufficiently overcome with its strength. While it might have been unfortunate for China, nearly all countries breathed a sigh of relief. Being a developed country isn't simply about having a lot of money. It requires civic awareness and community spirit. Developing countries tend to divide in crises, while developed nations unite. The U.S. is a nation known for its strong individualism, but in the face of crisis, it unites more strongly than any other country. Volunteers poured in, and schools and local communities voluntarily initiated fundraising efforts. Various races came together to support America. However, the Big One left a significant trauma on the entire nation. Whether one experienced it directly or not, everyone trembled in fear of earthquakes. Despite Professor Mohan's and the government's announcements that there would be no more aftershocks, the American public struggled to shake off their anxiety. Ronald delivered a speech in the devastated Silicon Valley. Unlike the inauguration ceremony that had sparse attendance, the crowd was so dense that there was barely space to stand. Before beginning his speech, there was a moment of silence coinciding with the time of the earthquake. Everyone lowered their heads to honor the victims. Ronald commenced his speech in a steady voice. Recently, we experienced a major disaster. The city that America was proud of, along with its bridges and the cradle of advanced industries. Silicon Valley has been destroyed. But the greater tragedy is that so many lives have been lost. We have lost our beloved families, friends, and colleagues. It is a deeply painful matter. As mentioned, nearly everyone here has lost someone precious. A son, daughter, mother, father, brother, sister, friend, colleague, and so on. I would like to talk about hope alongside sorrow. You all remember the 9/11 attacks. The World Trade Center, which collapsed then, now stands more magnificent than ever. When our ancestors first came to this land, there were no roads or buildings. In this vast emptiness, we laid paths and built homes. Buildings and factories can be rebuilt. As long as Americans live on this land, we can achieve anything. When I became president, I promised you this: to make America great again. And here today I reiterate that commitment. Together with you, I will make America a great place once more. Ronald's speech was enough to move people's hearts. Has there ever been a president as great in history? He saved America from the brink of disaster despite facing criticism and opposition from all sides. The audience slowly wiped their tears and applauded. I would like to introduce two people here today. I believe you all know who they are. Professor Kiran Mohan, who first identified the earthquake risk, and Kong Jin-Hu, who communicated it to everyone. Then Professor Mohan and Kong Jin-Hu appeared. At that moment, cheers and applause erupted. Wow! Ronald took both of their hands and lifted them high. He declared, "We will succeed. We will rescue the last survivor and recover the last body, returning them to their families. This disaster will be recorded in history as America's victory." The whole world watched Ronald's speech. Leaders from various countries gathered in the U.S. to discuss support and recovery issues. South Korea was represented by Prime Minister Hwang Kyu-sang, as President Park Si-hyung was always busy. While Ronald spoke with them, I conducted a live interview with CNN. A young female journalist named Mary Kenny asked me various questions. Why did you go to such lengths to inform about the risks of Big One, even pledging shares of OTK company? I answered as if it were obvious. Because lives were at stake. Compared to that, money is nothing. You truly saved countless lives. Thanks to Professor Mohan, who first predicted the major earthquake, and President Ronald, who believed him and directed measures. As I answered calmly, Kenny threw a surprising question. I heard that director Arthur Farah wants to make a movie depicting your life and donate all profits to the victims. Are you aware of this? Yes. Arthur Farah is a famous Hollywood director, considered to follow in the footsteps of Steven Spielberg or James Cameron. But my life. It's only been a little over 20 years. What movie could he make? I decided to be humble and do my best to elevate Ronald. I hope the movie focuses on President Ronald instead. Isn't that much more interesting? Kenny smiled and continued the conversation. Many Americans are grateful to you after the earthquake. The U.S. has always been South Korea's closest ally. During the Korean War, 500,000 young Americans fought and risked their lives for this country, which they didn't even know. Over 50,000 lost their lives on foreign soil. Thanks to that sacrifice, Korea can enjoy peace and prosperity today. If we could repay even a little of that debt this time, I would consider it fortunate. She nodded with a look of deep impression. What do you think about the title of American Hero, or Superhero? Thank you for saying that. But I believe the true heroes are the American people who are coming together to overcome this disaster. I would like to give that title to them. I heard you're returning to Korea tomorrow. I said it jokingly. In fact, I entered on a tourist visa. My stay is about to expire, and if I'm not careful, I might become an illegal immigrant. As you know, President Ronald doesn't like illegal immigration. She burst into laughter. Actually, many civic groups and politicians are claiming that we should grant special naturalization to you or award you honorary citizenship. Thank you very much just for saying that. I spoke while looking at the camera. The reason I'm going back to Korea is that I am confident there won't be any major earthquakes in the future. I know many people are still worried about aftershocks, but you can now rest assured. This was the reason for the interview. By leaving, I announced the conclusion of Big One. Before I left, I said goodbye to each of my staff members with whom I had lived together for that time. The disaster victims held a modest farewell party for me. As I entered, everyone gathered in the restaurant stood up and applauded. A young girl and boy presented me with a bouquet, and we took a commemorative photo together. They held my hands in gratitude, and I felt like tears might pour out, so I held back. After the brief event, I headed to LAX with Ronald. LAX had also experienced chaos due to the shock of Big One, with airplanes having accidents with the facilities. However, the recovery was completed in a day, and it was now back to normal, serving as a crucial gateway for transporting aid supplies and personnel. As I thought about finally returning to Korea, my feelings were strange. I hadn't expected such a long schedule until the very moment of departure. I recalled everything that had happened over the past few months. Meeting with Professor Mohan, White House briefings, press conferences, equity deposits, the Mexican earthquake, protests, impeachment, and Big One. So many events had occurred that it felt like years had passed. Ronald, sitting next to me, asked, "Are you really going to fly on a commercial plane? There are plenty of people offering private jets besides me. Apart from Air Force One, the presidential aircraft, there is also a private plane for the chairman of Stamper Corporation. Before becoming president, he used to fly around the U.S. campaigning on that plane. Do I really need to rent a private jet just to go home? In a situation like this, it's better to use resources where they are more needed." CEOs of large corporations eagerly offered their private jets to the U.S. government to be used for disaster recovery. When we arrive at the airport, don't be too surprised. What do you mean? By the time we approached, I started to understand what he meant. LAX was packed with crowds from the outside. As we got out of the car, people cheered while waving placards and Korean flags. Ronald. Ronald. Kang Jin-hoo. Kang Jin-hoo. It looks like a Hollywood star has appeared at the airport. My popularity is at this level these days. At the departure terminal, Ronald patted me on the back and said proudly, "You've really worked hard. Thank you on behalf of all Americans." "No, Mr. President, you've worked hard too. He still has a lot of work left to do. He needs to lead the rescue operations until the end and address subsequent issues one by one. Given the current mood, the midterm elections and even re-election should not be a problem, so he'll have to work hard for another 7 years. He doesn't see it as hardship but will gladly accept it. You'll have a surprise gift on the plane, so look forward to it." "Really? What has he prepared?" When I asked, Ronald just smiled slyly. "If I tell you, it wouldn't be a surprise gift, would it?" I boarded the flight to Korea amid everyone's send-off. I looked around my seat but couldn't see anything that resembled a gift. Could he have requested some duty-free goods or wine? I sat down and the flight took off safely. How long had it been since takeoff? I was about to recline my seat and try to sleep when the captain's announcement came on. "Would all passengers please take a moment to look out the window?" Following the announcement, I looked out. To my surprise, several fighter jets were surrounding the aircraft. The captain explained to the startled passengers. "On this flight is Kang Jin-hoo, the hero who saved California from crisis. A squadron of F-22s will escort this aircraft until it leaves U.S. airspace." Was this the surprise gift Ronald mentioned? What on earth is there to escort that requires fighter jets? And F-22s at that. They're really making a big show of this. I bet this is definitely going to be on TV. Upon arriving at Incheon International Airport and exiting to the arrival hall, I was met with a scene reminiscent of my departure from the U.S. Just like LA International Airport, this place was packed with a massive crowd. Everyone was there to see my face. While I had been criticized as a financial speculator back in Korea, this kind of warm welcome was a first for me. Is this what they call a triumphant return? The reporters thrust cameras and microphones at me in unison. "How does it feel to be a hero in America? What are your future plans? Please say a few words." Instead of answering, I just waved my hand. The bodyguards cleared a path and I quickly hopped into the waiting car outside the arrival hall. In the back seat, a familiar face was waiting. Jin-hoo. Ellie. She was dressed in a suit, likely having come straight from work. As soon as Ellie saw me, she embraced me tightly. I felt a warm, moving sensation. Can I kiss her? It shouldn't be visible from outside, right? Just as I was thinking that, a voice came from the front. "Hey buddy. Can't you see me?" Turning my head, I saw Taekyu sitting in the driver's seat. "Oh. You were here too." "Yeah, I was." Taekyu started the car and vehicles that looked like news vans followed behind us. Taekyu spoke while driving. I didn't realize it at the time because everything was so chaotic, but we really did something incredible, right? We saved so many people. I nodded. Yeah. We did it. After returning to Korea, I spent several days lying down, not going outside or contacting anyone, just sleeping. Since the big one occurred, I couldn't remember sleeping properly for nearly a month before that. It felt like no matter how much I slept, exhaustion kept creeping in as if I had unfinished homework. In the meantime, my mother, Hyunju, Sang-yeep, and Henry visited me. There were countless meeting requests from media outlets to CEOs of large corporations, but I turned them all down. When I finally woke up, I opened my eyes. I felt like I had dreamt something last night, but I couldn't quite remember. I think an elderly lady praised me for something. As I tried to get up, I noticed Ellie lying next to me. I remember the three of us, you, Ellie, and I, drinking wine together last night. Did we decide not to return to the hotel and just sleep here instead? It felt oddly natural to see her sleeping in my bed. Noticing my movement, Ellie slowly opened her eyes. You're awake. I kissed her forehead. It's the weekend, go back to sleep. At my words, Ellie closed her eyes again, snuggling closer to me. It's so nice having you next to me. I feel the same. I can't express how much I had missed her. After confirming that Ellie had fallen back asleep, I carefully got up and went to the living room. Taekyu was lying on the couch, munching on some snacks. Did you sleep well? Yeah. My home really is the best. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat on the couch. As I sipped my coffee while looking out at the garden, I suddenly felt the reality of being back home. It felt like the events of the past few months were just a dream. Could it be that nothing really happened? Despite the chaos on the other side of the world, Korea remains calm. Thinking back, it was the same when massive earthquakes struck neighboring countries like Japan, China, and South Asia. It was similar within the United States as well. Even though the West Coast was devastated, other regions functioned normally. This allowed for swift rescue and recovery efforts. People generally pay little attention to events that don't personally affect them. Let's eat. How about a Chinese restaurant for a change? Sounds good. Now that I think about it, it's been a while since I had jjajangmyeon. When I used to eat it every day, I got tired of it, but after a long time without it, I miss it. Let's order a jjajangmyeon and jambong set to share. And dumplings too. Shouldn't we ask Ellie what she wants to eat? Do I need to wake her up just to ask? But doesn't Taekyu care about a friend's girlfriend sleeping over? When I asked, Taekyu responded nonchalantly. Yeah. I told her to stay over. Oh, is that so? Just then Ellie came down to the living room. She hadn't expected to sleep over, so she wasn't wearing any extra clothes, just my t-shirt and pajamas. The mismatched outfit made her look oddly cute. Even with no makeup and just waking up, her beauty was dazzling. Looks like Taekyu is up too. Taekyu waved his hand and asked, "Did you sleep well?" Yes. I think I actually got a good sleep for the first time in a while. Ellie stretched widely, raising both hands above her head. "Ah." I asked her, "Is it okay if I order food from a Chinese restaurant?" Ellie nodded her head. "Korean jjajangmyeon is delicious. I'll have gochujang." Having grown up in Hong Kong, Ellie enjoys Chinese food regularly. I'm not sure if we should call our country's Chinese food actual Chinese food. Taekyu made the order over the phone. In the meantime, I enjoyed my morning coffee while admiring the garden visible outside with Ellie. She leaned her head gently against my shoulder, looking sleepy. Is Hyunju Uni going to work today too? Probably. She's still quite busy. It's the same on our side. Senior Sang-yeep has been busy organizing positions, and Henry has been shipping the products he pre-ordered from a Chinese steel company to the US as soon as they are made. We'll have to stock them in the warehouse and maybe sell them to the US government later. I was thinking of having dinner with Hyunju. I'll ask her. Not long after, the doorbell rang. Oh. They arrived early today. Taekyu pressed the remote to open the front gate without looking. Soon after, the doorbell rang again. I'll get it. I opened the front door wide. Standing there was my mother, holding a side dish container instead of a Chinese delivery bag. I was taken aback. Whoa. What brings you here all of a sudden? What do you mean, what brings me here? I told you on the phone yesterday that I'd bring side dishes today. Did you? I don't remember that. Why can't I recall? It's sudden, but there's no problem with my mother coming home. The issue is that Ellie is here. She doesn't even look like she just dropped by early. She clearly looks like she stayed overnight. How do others usually handle this kind of situation? Do they hide in the closet? Fortunately, the house is spacious with plenty of hiding spots. Surely my mother won't check the study. But I no longer needed to worry about that. Can I help you? Oh. Seeing my mother, Ellie jumped in surprise and bowed her head in greeting. Ah, hello ma'am. Good morning. My mother, looking flustered, alternated her gaze between me and Ellie, who was wearing my clothes, and asked, "Are you two already this close?" Ellie's face turned bright red up to her ears. "She looks cute like this. I went to work with Take You for the first time in a while." The employees gathered in the lobby and welcomed me with applause and cheers. Seeing how happy they are that the CEO has returned makes me feel rewarded for paying their salaries. Michael Lee, the head of HR, said to me, "Thank you sincerely. I'm so proud to work with you, sir." He is a second-generation Korean American who grew up in California, and his parents still live in LA. This must hold special significance for him. Well then, please don't leave just because your contract period is over. Stay with the company. Michael smiled. "I will consider it positively." I asked my senior Jae-hong, "How are you feeling?" Jae-hong replied cheerfully, "I'm okay now. I still feel some aches here and there though." Jae-hong had suffered 8 weeks of injuries from a brutal attack by the protesters. The assailants were identified using a facial recognition program on the recorded footage, and all of them were charged for collective assault without exception. Most of them were older individuals. They all claimed they were just following the orders of the association president, but the president, Lee Yong-kwang, denied the allegations strongly. I told the employees, "Many things have happened in a short time." While I was away, I gathered people at the managerial level for a meeting. First, I received reports on the situation of our subsidiaries. Most companies have suffered significant sales impacts over the past few months. Some have urgently requested funds. The chaos that unfolded is partly to blame, as there has been a boycott movement fueled by public criticism of me. However, the situation has now turned around. While it's positive that my efforts have greatly increased the company's visibility, it's negative that we cannot avoid consumption recession due to the economic downturn for the time being. Companies have also uniformly adjusted their strategies for the US market. For instance, Apple has been unable to announce the iPhone Z, originally scheduled for release on September 28, for a whole month. Still, we should be thankful it hasn't gone further. Otherwise, the global economy would have been stuck in a recessionary quagmire. Everyone nodded at Senior Sang Yeep's words. We too must revise our strategies. Karos, which originally aimed to launch new models by the end of the year, wasted time relocating its research lab, and autonomous driving experiments centered around San Francisco have all been halted. Things will settle down in time, so don't worry too much. Take You brought up another topic. We should also file damage claims against the conservative groups and media. While I had received reports about various situations including protests over the phone, seeing it in person was striking. Conservative groups, the media, far-right sites were all chaotic. There had long been suspicions that the Parents Association was being orchestrated by the government to stage controlled demonstrations and placeholder protests. It wouldn't make sense otherwise. Questions arose on where they were getting their information, the source of their funds for leading large-scale protests, and so forth. Furthermore, while the police strictly prohibited protests by progressive groups, they approved every single protest organized by the Parents Association without exception. During the investigation of this illegal protest, the Parents Association's office was raided, revealing a slew of related documents. The phone of Chairman Lee Yong-kwang had call logs and texts exchanged with employees from the National Intelligence Service and the Blue House. Dozens of proxy accounts were discovered with hundreds of millions of won transferred, and a safe containing tens of millions in cash and records was found under his desk. There will likely be more uncovered upon further investigation. Chairman Lee Yong-kwang is currently under investigation while in custody, and he seems to be speaking loudly, perhaps because he feels he has some support. Look at this. Take You turned over a box, revealing a pile of letters sent from all over the country. They were letters of support and gratitude, or rather pleas to withdraw complaints. Senior Jae-hong said, "There are many more emails. Some guy posts tearful stories online that are hard to read without shedding tears. He talks about how his family was poor since childhood, how they rarely ate out like others, and how he always had to cook instant noodles alone when his mother was at work. I don't understand how his difficult family background relates to his abusive language. Initially, I didn't even file complaints just based on insults or swearing. I only selected the most serious cases to report, and even then there were a truckload of them. I was curious about who wrote those posts, and upon looking I found a variety of people from elementary school students to office workers. Most had no particular reason. They simply didn't like me or wanted attention. Well, I accepted that part. It wouldn't lead to a serious arrest anyway, so I figured that if they went through the investigation and paid a fine, it might help me get their act together. What's notable is that some of the most active accounts posting and commenting to sway public opinion are suspected to be employees from the National Intelligence Service or government offices. It wasn't like they conducted a complicated operation through foreign servers. Just checking IPs and searching for IDs on portals and social media made it easy to identify them. Senior Sang Yeep said, "There's one guy using the nickname Jinhu Hyosu. When I checked his ID, it seems he's an NIS employee." Jinhu Hyosu? What kind of nickname is that? Does it mean he wants to hang my head on a stake? That guy was also the first to post a photo combining your face with that of a porn star. I was so baffled that I asked, "Does the National Intelligence Service really do things like that?" Then Takey replied, "You know, those kids are still making a profit from it. It's not that the judiciary hasn't investigated or that the media hasn't properly covered it. There have been numerous cases that have come to light so far. If we dig into this, it could get interesting. It seems like both the National Intelligence Service and the Defense Security Command are involved." The Defense Security Command too? What kind of military is not protecting the country and instead writing insults about me online? I crossed my arms and said, "But will the investigation and punishment actually be carried out properly?" Tiki replied, "I have no idea when the police and prosecutors started working this hard, but both sides seem to be ignited with enthusiasm for investigation as if in competition." Senior Sang Yeep nodded. "This time will be different. The misalignment has started to show over there as well. Those who used to move like dogs for power tend to have a keen sense for it. By now, Park Si-hyung must have concluded that he's like a kite with a broken string." "Bitches behind me." Chairman Lee Yong-gwang shouted at the police during his arrest and investigation, claiming that BH was behind him. Here, BH is an abbreviation for Blue House, referring to the presidential office. His phone revealed numerous calls and text exchanges with National Intelligence Service employees and the secretary room of the Blue House's Political Affairs Office. Moreover, his notebook contained multiple notations stating BH directives. According to the messages, Blue House Secretary Lee Il-seon instructed on the date and location of protests, and conservative organizations acted accordingly. Currently, the prosecution is tracking the flow of funds related to the alias accounts. Surprisingly, the first outlet to break the news was Jungilbo. Following that, similar articles poured in. Chairman Lee Yong-gwang boasts about his power while on the phone with the Blue House secretary in front of his members. Testimonies from Parents Association members confirm they witnessed the conversations. What is the relationship between the Parents Association and President Park Si-hyung? Did President Park Si-hyung know about Secretary Lee Il-seon's instructions? What are the legal repercussions for the contractors' protests? What is the source of cash found in alias accounts and safes? Hiring defectors for controlled demonstrations at 20,000 won per person. Even internet users were taken aback by the article exposing the regime's flaws. "I can't believe it. Jungilbo is criticizing the government. I question my own eyes. This is as shocking as if the Rodong Sinmun criticized the supreme leader. Well, a few journalists got arrested and now they're turning on him. If you have any loyalty, don't criticize the leader. When they were eagerly flattery, now they're backstabbing. Betrayal icon Jungilbo. It's so strange to see Jungilbo reporting the truth. Please return to your tabloid roots." The Blue House immediately denied it. Spokesperson Seo Mun-jong stated that the Blue House has no connection with the Parents Association and emphasized that the actions of the Blue House secretary were entirely personal deviations. Naturally, no one believed that statement. There's a saying that fame is the tax you pay for becoming well-known. While it's not about paying money directly, it's true that it brings a lot of annoying situations. One of those is having to change your phone number often. I don't know where my number got leaked, but I'm getting calls from all directions. Reporters wanting to interview, various organizations asking for donations, politicians encouraging me to join their party, old school friends pretending to be close, people I barely know trying to connect, random strangers, prank calls, scammers, and so on. I changed my number and sent a message to those whose contacts I had saved, informing them about the change. I've lost count of how many times I've done this. As I was grumbling to myself, my phone rang. Hey, you changed your number again, senior. A lively young woman's voice came through the phone. It was none other than Shin Yuri. It's been a while. How have you been? Oh, I'm always the same. Listening closely, it sounded like she was at school. We caught up on everything we had missed. Anything happening at school? Nothing much, except that a conservative group pushed into the campus and protested. I was taken aback. They went there too? Yes. Since you're a student at Korea University, they were saying the dean should come out and apologize to the public personally. What did our dean do wrong? Fortunately, most of the protesters were reportedly gathered in front of the OTK company headquarters, so the numbers weren't too high. There was a lot of criticism about you on campus. The seniors in their final year were complaining that they might not get jobs because of you. Why is it my fault they can't get jobs? Yuri said with a feigned air of superiority. Still, I believed in you until the end. I thought there must be a reason for your actions. You should thank me, right? Yeah. Thanks. And after all, the situation turned upside down after the big one. From then on, Korea University started to heavily promote that it was the alma mater of Kang Jin-hoo. They've put up banners at the main and back gates. They also put up a big one on the business school building. Banners. You'll be surprised when you see them. You can see them if you come to school now. Or should I take a picture and send it to you? No. I should avoid going near the school for a while. I can't believe they haven't put one up at my elementary, middle, and high schools too, right? Yuri sighed as if to say. You're drifting further away. Me. Isn't that right? At first, you were just a plain student about to return, but before I knew it, you became a CEO of an investment firm, and now you're a hero who saved America. Is that so? To think that I didn't know I would end up like this when I first met Yuri. Anyway, even if you continue to succeed, don't forget your junior at school. I smiled. Got it. Now that I think of it, the only junior I keep in touch with is Yuri. I should get to class now. See you soon, senior. Study hard. I hung up the phone and leaned back in my chair. Take-you, lying on the sofa, said, It's quiet today. It was quiet yesterday too. It's been so peaceful these last few days that it's almost boring. The company is running smoothly without me, so I don't really have anything to do. I thought about going next door to see Ellie's face, but then another call came in. This time it was Chairman Im Jin-young. He had just returned to Korea after checking the damage situation at the California sales outlets of Samsung Electronics and meeting with the CEOs of global IT companies. Unlike other companies that are taking a conservative approach to the US market, Samsung Electronics was actually aiming to expand its market share. With this incident, they had significantly raised their recognition in the US, believing that now is the time to row while the water is high. If you have time, would you like to grab a coffee? I had nothing to do at that moment. Sure, I'll come over. I got into a car with Take-you and headed to the Samsung Group headquarters. An employee who had been waiting for us guided us directly to the chairman's office. Inside, along with Chairman Im Jin-young, there was a middle-aged woman. President Im Soo-mi stood up to greet us when she saw us. It's been a while. CEO Kang Jin-hoo, Vice President Oh Take-you. You were together. I hope I'm not interrupting any important conversation. Chairman Im Jin-young smiled and replied, It was just a casual conversation between siblings. What could be a typical conversation between the Samsung siblings? Surely they aren't discussing which company to acquire. I said to President Im Soo-mi, I heard you've taken great care of my mother this time. Thank you. She shook her head. Oh, there's no need to thank me. I haven't really done much. That's not true. My mother was quite anxious about suddenly changing her residence. But thanks to you, she was able to feel at ease during her stay. At my words, President Im Soo-mi smiled. I'm glad to hear that. Please tell her that I enjoyed visiting her every day. During my mother's stay at the hotel, Im Soo-mi visited her daily to check if she was comfortable, had room service together, or just kept her company. Whether it was pure goodwill or had other intentions, I do owe her. Someday I would repay her kindness. I have another appointment, so I'll excuse myself first. Goodbye. President Im Soo-mi left the chairman's office and we took our seats. Chairman Im Jin-young handed me the newspaper. Have you seen the article? Yes. I never expected the Jungilbo to publish an article on the front page investigating the relationship between the Parents Association and the Blue House. There have been controversies regarding the Parents Association and various conservative groups organizing protests for a long time. However, throughout that time the judicial authorities had not conducted investigations, and the media remained silent. This time, however, there was direct evidence from the police investigation, and the media simultaneously broke the story. I heard there were also texts sent by a Blue House secretary directing protests in Dongtan. Few people know the location of my mother's house in Dongtan. Therefore, I did not anticipate that conservative groups would gather there to protest. The Parents Association and the conservative groups were no different from hired thugs. They had no qualms about illegal protests, property damage or assault, and the police allowed them to run rampant. I remembered my senior, Ji Hong, who was assaulted by members of the conservative group. If there hadn't been security guards and if I hadn't quickly taken my mother elsewhere, the same incident could have happened to us. The mere thought of it stirred my anger. There are things that should never be touched by anyone. These are typically referred to as red lines. Park Si-hyung has crossed the line numerous times, but this incident was absolutely unforgivable. Taekyu said, "They say the Federation of Korean Industries funded the Parents Association. Is that true?" Chairman Im Jin-yong replied in a bitter voice. "That's correct. Money from the Federation and the National Intelligence Service flowed that way. Some of the protests were directed by the Federation. It's a shameful story, but it's true that the Samsung Group was also involved. While the founding purpose of the Federation was to promote South Korea's economic development, in reality, it served as a private gathering for the interests of conglomerates and a link for collusion between politics and business. I don't know what it was like in the past, but recently, the Federation has only pressured politics to create favorable laws for businesses, petitioned for the amnesty of CEOs caught for economic crimes, and funded conservative groups. If the corruption is revealed, won't Samsung Group face issues as well?" At Taekyu's question he smiled bitterly. "It was ultimately the work of the late father, but the group cannot avoid moral responsibility. I am prepared to take responsibility for what needs to be accountable. Many were involved in the practical aspects, but ultimately, it would just be pushed onto the late chairman Im Il-kwon. After all, legal responsibility cannot be held against the deceased. The Federation of Korean Industries is a relic of a bygone era. It's not suited for today's times. The Samsung Group plans to withdraw on this occasion. Are you sure that's okay? The reason companies join and pay is that the Federation holds significant influence in politics. We don't care. However, companies benefiting greatly in the domestic market will find it difficult. The Unsung Car Group is a prime example. In fact, Unsung Car has benefited most from the conservative group's protest rallies. They would show up to oppose the strikers whenever the union went on strike, demanding the noble union to stop their actions. The Unsung Car Union has a bad reputation, which created a "they're all the same" atmosphere. Chairman Han Min-gu and Vice Chairman Han Chan-young are both known to be actively involved in the Federation's activities. How are they connected to this incident? The investigation results haven't been revealed yet, but this will be quite a major negative factor for the presidential election. After returning to Korea, I realized that Korea is currently in the midst of the presidential election season. The primaries of each party have already concluded, and candidates have been determined with only registration remaining. Chairman Im Jin-yong provided some explanations. In this presidential election, Lee Jong-hae of the Korean Party and Hyo Chong-min of the New Politics Party are the two strong candidates, representing conservative and progressive factions. Originally, the prominent candidate from the Korean Party was Congressman Choi Myung-hwan. However, he created controversy by illegally withdrawing funds during the Hosung Savings Bank incident and was forced to resign as party leader due to public pressure. The new figure that emerged during this time is the three-term legislator Lee Jong-hae. Entering politics through Park Si-hyung's recruitment, she had not made much of an impact until then. However, after becoming party leader, she managed the party well and launched her campaign, leveraging her young image in her 40s and being a woman to draw attention. Ultimately, she became the Korean Party candidate, with strong support from Park Si-hyung's faction. The main opposition party's candidate, Hyo Chong-min of the New Politics Party, has a background as a labor lawyer and holds a centrist progressive stance. It's fair to view him as the single progressive candidate. Who will it be? Well, there are many variables in this election. Above all, the biggest variable would be you, Jr. Depending on whom the hero who saved California from disaster supports, it could significantly influence the presidential race. After all, he played a kingmaker role in the U.S. presidential election, so there's no rule saying he can't do it in the South Korean election. Chairman Im Jin-young continued. And another variable is Park Si-hyung. By now, he must be looking for ways not to transfer power. At the time of the impeachment vote and resignation announcement in the U.S., it was midnight in South Korea. It was such a sensitive issue that Park Si-hyung stayed awake to watch the situation unfold on TV from the Blue House. The reason Ronald found himself in this predicament was entirely because of Kang Jin-hoo. Now Kang Jin-hoo would lose all his wealth and honor, falling into ruin. Park Si-hyung chuckled as he imagined that scenario. Finally, the long-standing grudge comes to an end. Perhaps they could have had a good relationship, but it was he who first aimed the blade at the passive Kang Jin-hoo. This was inevitable because OTK Company had expanded into the automotive industry. Kang Jin-hoo acquired Chrysler and supported Ronald. Both posed a threat to Unsung Motors and peace. Thus they attempted to bind his hands using power. From this point things started to unravel. The unlawful investigation by the prosecution and the illegal surveillance by the National Intelligence Service were exposed, and bizarrely Ronald, whom they thought was a sinking anchor, was elected. The unfortunate connection continued thereafter. Instead of seeking forgiveness, Kang Jin-hoo retaliated. The revelation of the mismanagement at Hosong Savings Bank dealt a fatal blow to the regime. Park Si-hyung waited for an opportunity to retaliate, and thankfully that opportunity appeared before his term ended. The reason he couldn't mobilize law enforcement directly as before was that Ronald was backing him. However, Ronald found himself politically cornered. The boldly pursued policies were hindered in the Democratic-controlled Congress, and endless scandals erupted. In addition, Kang Jin-hoo stirred chaos in the U.S., leading to rapidly declining approval ratings. Everyone believed he would not only lose the upcoming elections but would also be unable to secure a second term. Determining that Ronald was no longer a threat, Park Si-hyung mobilized conservative groups, media and law enforcement to seek revenge. Now he just had to watch with joy as Kang Jin-hoo and Ronald fell. But when Big One arrived, everything changed. In an instant, Ronald transformed from a president on the brink of impeachment into a strong leader, while Kang Jin-hoo, once ridiculed, became the hero who saved California from crisis. Park Si-hyung was engulfed in shock. What the hell went wrong? It felt like he had poked a hornet's nest by unnecessarily seeking revenge. Park Si-hyung had faced countless crises over time. Despite that, he could manage to get through safely because the investigative agencies acted according to his wishes. However, those who had previously acted on their own initiative began to rebel one by one. He applied pressure to halt the investigation, but the police and prosecutors did not comply. It was not incomprehensible. While Park Si-hyung had only a few months left in his term, behind Kang Jin-hoo stood a U.S. president with a support rate exceeding 90% and a guaranteed re-election. In such a situation, the command of the investigation would not make an impact. Park Si-hyung coolly assessed the circumstances. Contrary to some criticisms, he loved democracy more than anyone else. Anyone born a commoner could, through effort, sit on a throne and wield power. Where is there a more rational system than this? But that power is temporary. Anyone must step down after 5 years. He had enjoyed enough glory in those 5 years and had little attachment to the position. What he was concerned about was whether he could safely step down from the throne. As soon as Park Si-hyung became president, he launched political reprisals against the previous administration. There was no guarantee that the same fate wouldn't befall him after a regime change. He felt he understood why Syngman Rhee manipulated the constitution or why Chun Doo-hwan announced the constitutionality measures. Unfortunately, doing such things in today's era was impossible. He needed to strategize to survive. The ruling party, the Korean Party, had many talented individuals. Among them, the reasons for his choice of Lee Jong-hae as a successor were twofold. One was her great ambition and the other was her numerous weaknesses. A person with great ambition is easy to understand, and someone with many weaknesses is easy to manipulate. If Lee Jong-hai became president, he could leave the Blue House with a comfortable mind. Recently, it seems the media and the prosecution are keeping an eye on Kang Jin-ho. An individual's influence becoming too large isn't good for running the nation, Lee Jong-hai said calmly. Right now he's celebrated as a hero, but how long will this situation last? Soon he will be forgotten. People may not forget their grudges, but they easily forget kindness. So Kang Jin-ho's popularity will fade with time, but the problem is now. With the Hozong Savings Bank incident leading to the arrest of his family, approval ratings plummeted. Recently, the Blue House's involvement in a service protest was revealed, causing another drop. Is all of this ultimately because of Kang Jin-ho? When talk of the presidential election arose, Lee Jong-hai confidently replied, "There will definitely be no regime change." Park Si-hyung shook his head. "No, a regime change is necessary." A look of surprise appeared on Lee Jong-hai's face. As you know, in the current situation, it's hard to guarantee a victory. Polls showed Lee Jong-hai trailing Hyo Chong-min within the margin of error, and a sense of crisis was rising in the Korean party that they might lose the election. So, start party reforms. The leader should apologize to the public for the current government's failures and change the party name. Liberal People's Party sounds good. Change the party logo from red to blue and purge the pro-Park faction from within. That way we can transition from the Korean party to the Liberal People's Party. Lee Jong-hai was taken aback. Are you saying we should get rid of the pro-Park members? Of course. We need to drive them out to reform the party. From a distance, a political party appears to be a collection of individuals with similar political ideologies. However, the larger the party, the more factions exist, dividing into mainstream and non-mainstream groups. The non-mainstream can only be dragged along by the mainstream who hold power within the party. The mainstream of the Korean party was associated with the pro-Park faction, known as the Park Si-hyung group. They had been loyal to Park Si-hyung for a long time and played a significant role in making him president. Naturally, they would not easily relinquish their power within the party. There will be chaos within the party. That's good. The stronger the backlash, the more genuine it will appear to the public as an effort for regime change. Of course, Park Si-hyung would stand by the pro-Park members until the end, but a president experiencing a lame duck period can only assist to a limited extent. If Lee Jong-hai goes against Park Si-hyung while ousting the pro-Park faction, the regime change narrative will resonate. The most important thing is winning the presidential election. To prevent the power from being handed over, some sacrifices will have to be made. Those sacrifices would fall on those who have been loyal to the president and the party. Lee Jong-hai asked with a worried expression, "Is it really okay to do this?" Nonetheless, Park Si-hyung's ability to maintain power was rooted in his approval ratings. While this strategy might draw in the centrist conservative supporters who harbor resentment towards Park Si-hyung, it could also lead to the possible alienation of existing supporters. However, given that there is only one conservative candidate, there are no other alternatives. There's nothing to worry about. I have thought of other methods as well. Park Si-hyung's close aide, Chong Hwa-dae's secretary for General Affairs Bae Jin-hon, secretly met with a man. He was Choi Moon-gil, the representative of the Reform Party, with a robust appearance in his mid-60s. The political landscape is often divided into progressives and conservatives, or left-wing and right-wing. However, even among progressives, not everyone shares the same views. Political positions differ significantly based on economics, diplomacy, security, welfare, and taxation. In this context, Choi Moon-gil was the most radical and reformist. Originally active as a representative of a civic group, he has advocated for the dismantling of conglomerates, elimination of irregular jobs, tax increases, and expanded welfare. Elected as an independent, he gathered like-minded individuals to establish the Reform Party, which has now grown into the fourth largest party in the National Assembly with 9 members. Choi Moon-gil, with a displeased expression, asked Bae Jin-hon, "What's the reason for this meeting?" Bae Jin-hon replied politely, "Are you considering running in the upcoming presidential election?" I'm not sure why you're asking that here. If corruption is the problem for conservatives, division is the issue for progressives. The reason for Park Si-hyung's loss in the last presidential election was also because the progressive camp ran 2 candidates. The top priority is a change in government. Thus, the opposition parties in the assembly had implicitly agreed to support the New Politics Party candidate Hyo Chong-min. Then how about you run in the presidential election? No, I hope you will. For a moment Choi Moon-gil wondered if he had misheard due to disbelief. What did you just say? Rather than words, it's better to show you first. Bae Jin-han took out a bag he had placed under the table and opened it. To his amazement, it was filled with 50,000 won bills. Upon seeing that, Choi Moon-gil was taken aback and immediately stood up. What are you trying to do? Bae Jin-han calmly replied, it's a wonderful world. In the past, when there were only 10,000 won bills, they used to carry them in apple boxes. Now, even a bag can hold 500 million. A bundle of 50,000 won is 5 million won. In other words, that bag contains at least 100 of those bundles. This money has no issues. Cash cannot be tracked, and if both the giver and the receiver keep quiet, there's no way to get caught. I've brought a few more identical bags. Choi Moon-gil glared at him and said, if you don't leave immediately, I will call the police. If you hand me the keys, I'll load it into the trunk for you. It seems words won't suffice. Choi Moon-gil actually appeared to be getting ready to report to the police, pulling out his phone from his pocket. Bae Jin-han didn't stop him. I've heard you recently suffered a significant loss from a poor investment. Who would have thought there would actually be an earthquake in San Francisco? Choi Moon-gil paused his movement about to press the call button. What do you mean? You established a paper company in Bermuda and conducted transactions through an offshore account, didn't you? Well, what? Bae Jin-han had been exposing various corporate malpractices since his days as a civic group leader. In the process, he managed to obtain critical information earlier than others. This included positive news that could raise stock prices or negative news that could cause declines. In modern society, information is money. Knowing something but not being able to utilize it makes one no better than a fool. Suddenly, he thought of President Park Si-hyung. Since his time as governor of Gyeonggi Province, he had initiated numerous national policy projects. After becoming president, he funneled trillions of won into overseas corporate acquisitions and resource development projects under the guise of securing foreign resources. Yet there were hardly any results, and the public enterprises involved had sunk into capital erosion. The opposition raised multiple issues and even called for a national investigation, but the invested money all vanished, making it impossible to trace. Some suspected that Park Si-hyung was manipulating funds to embezzle state money. If that were true, Park Si-hyung would be akin to an expert at hiding assets using offshore accounts. The police can't find money hidden by a thief. It's usually the thief that knows where it's concealed. Ha! He let out a hollow laugh. Is it like a petty thief making a fuss in front of a grand robber? For so long he had criticized the Blue House and ruling party as the opposition leader. From Park Si-hyung's perspective, he must have been a thorn in his side. Yet he remained silent until now. Of course, since it was discovered through illegal means, it couldn't be publicly disclosed, but he could have easily leaked suspicions to the press. Could it be that he was holding on to this until the very end to use in this situation? Bae Jin-han asked him, what will you do? Will you run for president, or will you disclose the fact that you invested in an overseas account and face punishment and criticism? Choi Moon-gil was at a loss for words. But the answer was almost predetermined.